trying to do this when we're online. Obviously, we're online because stuff happened during the week.
Yeah, things happen. 30-second story. I've got a 30-second story.
Okay, starting
Ready
now.
for it, Doc?
Oh, you start.
Now, wait. I'm going to do it right now. Okay, boom, 3, 2, 1, whap, 30 seconds. So, Pants got into a little bit of a fender bender over the weekend. I was pulling out of a McDonald's, turning right, and person just wasn't paying attention. And they hit me in the fender, blah, blah, blah. So, I got stuck in a space without my cameras and all that stuff. But the moral of the story is to be kind. Be kind to people because they're kind to you. And that's the 30-second story on why we don't have cameras.
Boom.
Did I hit it?
I have no idea because I wasn't keeping track of the time. I'm going to assume it was probably pretty close. But I really don't know.
Eat hot sauce next week.
Oh, we're going to do that. We're going to do that when we're live because obviously right now there may be complications. You may not be seeing our faces. You may just be hearing us. You may be just seeing my face because of all these different things. Anyway, I am Doc Bishop. What is up?
And I am Pants.
You are Pants. I hope you have pants, even though they can't see you.
Ooh.
Don't answer that question. Anyway, this is ScrubHub Shorts, where we talk about one game in one episode.
That is right.
Hopefully shorter, but it tends to be a little bit longer because we're cramming a whole game into it.
Ironically.
But this game is all about time, so hopefully we can do it in enough time. And
in less than an infinity.
In less than infinity, yeah.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario, we'll just start over. Wouldn't it be really funny if the episode just started over right now?
Right, where it was like.
But we are.
What's up, ScrubHub? Today.
You want to tell them what we're talking about?
Today, peeps, Scrubbies, we are talking about Prince of Persia: Sands of Time. Came out 2003.
2003 on the PS2.
That's right. Who? It was Ubisoft.
Ubisoft made
out,
it.
Right?
Yep.
That's right. So Ubisoft game came on PS2, 2003, and it is. I mean, if I can sum it up in just a few words, adventure platformer in it's not a prehistoric world. It's history.
It's
a period game where you're like in Persia.
Like Persia. You're the Prince of Persia.
Yeah,
it's not like
Persia, yeah.
It's not like it's like set in the time of Aladdin.
It's like 780 or something, right?
I don't know. I don't know if there's an actual year associated to the game. That'd be really fascinating to look up. I don't know if that's relevant. It doesn't matter. Like it's set in I hate to say it, okay, stereotypical like Aladdin time frame, right?
Yeah.
That type what basically everything you think about, that's kind of what it is. An adventure platformer, I would have definitely called it a puzzle platformer. I think it's more puzzles than it is adventure. You do have combat, which we have different takes on. We do know that. We have different takes on approaching the combat. But for the most part, you are the Prince of Persia, who is not named in this trilogy that's on the PS2. Quadrilogy now, I guess. But I think Forgotten Sands was on the PS3, and it came back out several years later. And so you're playing as a prince, and the beginning of the game, you, the prince, are... Well, how does the beginning start? Like, it's so far... I just played this game. You start off, and you're going to a palace for some reason, right? I think to impress their leader or...
Well, you guys are... It seems like you and your father are traveling.
Right. I just couldn't remember
lands.
I just couldn't remember where. Like, that's horrible. I'm like...
I think there is... They kind of brushed over it pretty quickly because what happens is you guys are traveling and you come upon this palace. Mm-hmm. So they kind of brush past where you're going, but you find this palace, and if I'm not mistaken, the vizier plans a meeting. Your vizier, anyway, plans a meeting with the sultan of the current palace or whatever,
right?
And for something or whatever, probably because he knows that there's something valuable there, right?
Right. There are treasures in this palace that are definitely sought after. And the prince basically runs off on his own to find one of these treasures to claim for himself, seemingly to impress his father.
Yes.
And he finds...
That's what his focus is in the beginning.
And he finds this dagger in this, tomb thing. Maybe not a tomb, but in this room. He finds this dagger. And he quickly finds out that this dagger is not just a normal dagger. It allows him to kind of shift time in a way, because he goes to grab the dagger and this rock falls down out of the sky, and he's able to rewind time and kind of dodge out of the way.
Right.
That's his first interaction with the dagger.
Something to note is he does not lose his memory when he does that.
That's true. He retains his memory, so that way he can adapt to that situation. Otherwise, he'd still get squished.
Right.
So then he takes the dagger back to his father, and it presents it to his father. But they also have this giant hourglass that they found, which kind of escapes me how they got that, or if it was just in the thing.
I don't understand what... here's the thing that I'm confused about. Yeah. Maybe this kind of skipped us. Is, so we invaded this palace, right? And then the prince found the dagger. Were the dagger and the hourglass owned by the same people? And why were they so seemingly polite towards the end? Why was it seemed like, oh no, wait, wasn't the king killed? The vizier killed the sultan
of the palace that they were in?
Yes. Didn't he stab him or something? Or maybe it was the prince's father?
Well, the father got... So real quick, so the father was transformed from the hourglass.
No, I'm not talking prior to that. Because it seemed like when they were in that room with the hourglass, and kind of the king, or I should say the prince's father, was deciding what gift the vizier would be given for helping him attain these treasures and stuff. And
right.
He said you can have anything except for
the dagger that the prince had.
Yeah, except for the dagger the prince had. And the hourglass. You could not have either of those things, but anything else you could have. And in the midst of... He got frustrated. And in the midst of that, the vizier was like, well, Prince, did you know that the dagger and the hourglass are connected? My point was, it seemed like while they were in that room... I guess there was people under restraint. There was guards pushing people back, because that's where the woman was when... the prince actually approached the hourglass with the dagger and said, Vizier told him to insert it. And the woman in the back that was, now that I'm recalling, restrained by guards or whatever, was like, no, don't do it. Because for some reason, this woman in the crowd just knew what was going to happen or whatever. And as you were saying, homeboy dies and stuff. Now, you want to take it away from there?
Right. So ultimately, the prince releases these sands, and these sands go throughout the entire palace, transforming everyone except the prince, because he's protected by the dagger. Farah, the daughter of the Maharaja of this palace, because she's protected by an amulet, and the vizier is protected because of his staff, which is not necessarily something that is explained in the game.
His magic stick.
But you don't it's almost irrelevant because you don't see him until the end of the game anyway. So everything's transformed. People are transformed into sand beasts, and the only way to seemingly undo this. The vizier wants the dagger because he's dying, essentially. And he wants the dagger to use the sands of time to keep himself from dying. And now the prince is tasked with seemingly the only way to reverse the effects of everything that's happened is to get the dagger back into the hourglass. And so you basically are on this whole journey in this palace of getting back to the hourglass. And along the way, you have Farah, the daughter of the Maharaja, which we've talked about. She's kind of alongside you, helping you in instances of which, oh man, I'm so glad this game didn't do this. It was a good opportunity for them to turn this into like a hand-holding type of a mission where you're like guiding her around the palace.
Oh god, yeah, that'd be horrible.
But instead, she's very independent. When she's with you in the same room, she has her own bow and she's fighting the enemies, which is actually pretty beneficial. And then in other instances, she's also like helping you get into the next room by going through cracks in the wall or holes in the wall or something like that. That could have been.
She's very automatic.
Yeah, it could have been an entirely different. Dude, I had one instance where I'm like, man, I don't know what to do, and I found this stone which you were supposed to move, and I was like, okay, cool, I'm gonna move it, and she's like, hey, there's a hole. I'm like, okay, cool, yeah. So you need to get in there. But she got blocked by the big rock I was moving, and she just stopped and wouldn't move. And I couldn't move the rock anymore because she was blocking it.
Oh my god.
It was so frustrating.
Dude.
But it's really nice. So she helps with those puzzles, though.
Yeah, and it's I think it's nice when, like you were saying, like, you just, like, found the block, moved it. Maybe you didn't pick up on it, like, the hole immediately, but she did. Like, she's right there, and her AI is very attentive to what the player is doing. Therefore, making the game isn't hand-holdy in terms of, like, you have to hold her hand, but the game is a little bit hand-holdy in terms of holding your hand.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of true. In a weird way.
Which I think is okay. I think that's fine sometimes, as long as it's not, like, overbearing. But this game does it in a way, especially with some of the dialogue that comes across and the banter that the two of them have. It comes across very fluid and feels good in the game because it feels like you actually have an NPC, which gamers all alike can relate to this, is the NPCs never help. They're never helpful.
Yeah, they don't do anything.
Farah,
they're usually in the way.
Right, they're always in the way. But Farah's actually kind of sick. Farah's actually pretty dope. And she's very, like I said, very attentive to what the player is doing and helps point things out. And more often than not, I'll say I had one moment with Farah that I'll mention. But more often than not, that she is there to actually help, and she's actually beneficial to being there. But there was one time where I was going up a staircase, excuse me, and she just jumped off screen. So I'm walking along, and out of nowhere, the camera just swings and shifts to her now dead body. And it's like, wait, Farah didn't die there. Let me tell that again.
Oh my gosh.
What the fuck do you mean, bro? Why'd you commit fucking suicide in the middle of a mission right now? I thought we was a team.
That's super funny. I wonder what caused that. I only had one instance in which she did die. Like, if you get in combat and there's a bunch of guys around you, some of them will, like, target her and grab onto her. And she has her own health bar that kind of appears. And all you have to do is go and hit the guy. And then that's it. She almost never gets attacked twice in the same instance. But I did have one instance where she got killed because I just could not get to her in time. But other than that, I'd never had any issues. They have this, like, Farah and the Prince have this love-hate kind of relationship where they don't really trust each other, but then they start trusting each other. And as the Prince...
Very roller coastery.
Yeah, as the Prince is growing, he's growing in power from defeating these enemies. It's making the dagger stronger. Collecting sands that you find scattered is making the dagger stronger. He's able to slow down time. He's able to reverse time. He's able to freeze enemies in their tracks. He's able to freeze all enemies simultaneously and basically go into like a hyper speed mode, which I never did in the game because I couldn't figure out how, because I skipped the tutorial.
Yeah, I could never figure out how to do that.
And then he also has one more ability, which allows him to see the future. And it's represented by these pillars of sand, but it's a power that is because of the dagger, which kind of gives you hints for the puzzle of that area and potentially the next areas to come. And those are always, they were really nice because they were flavorful, not only in giving you hints about the area, like you're doing this parkour stuff, right? To climb up walls and shimmying and rope swinging and all these different wall running, all these different things. And they're flavorful, and sometimes they showed combat, giving you hints of how you could fight enemies. But they also showed instances in which the prince died.
Yeah, so
which I thought was really cool.
Watch out for this, like, but also, like you said, it's kind of thematic. Like, these are different ways that, like, the future does go. So in a weird way, it's kind of like the prince has now been imbued by this ability to. I wonder if it's solely the dagger. I mean, granted, we're only discussing Prince of Persia: Sands of Time.
Just the Sands of Time, yeah. There are in this current franchise, there are mainly 3 games: Sands of Time, Warrior Within, and The Two Thrones. Warrior Within taking place 7 years later, so they're hardly connected directly. So we are just talking Sands of Time right now.
Right.
That doesn't mean we won't come back to do Warrior Within. I think you'll like it.
Oh yeah,
Warrior Within is really good.
We haven't really even. I mean, we haven't got there yet. But the endings of our games are wildly different.
Oh yeah, I got the good ending.
Yeah, you did get the good ending.
Pants got the bad ending.
I did.
For those wondering, there's only one ending to the game.
There is only one true ending to the game.
So you may be like, what? We'll talk about that here in a second.
Yeah, but it seems as if, I don't know, maybe it's only the dagger. Maybe the prince has been now imbued with some sort of ability or powers that when he steps into these pillars of sand, or these pillars of light and sand, he's getting this like you said, these glimpses of the future, like, and sometimes they lead to his death. Sometimes they show how he defeats these enemies and stuff. So that's super cool, and how it kind of goes into sepia film style color, where it's like looks real dreamy and kind of sandy. It's really cool. The game is very like tied into itself. It's very meta.
Yeah, it's really nice, and it's a good, and it's also it's also your save point, right? So yes, you can skip the visions where you don't have to watch them, but it is your save point, so you kind of want to see the visions so you know what's going on. So when you reload the game on a different day, you could rewatch the vision and remember what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, which is really helpful, especially when you stop playing in the middle of the night, in the middle of a puzzle, and then come back to it, and you're like,
so
I have no idea where I need to go.
So this game continues playing. You're going through the palace. Your goal is to get back to, I think it's called the Tower of Dawn, which is where the hourglass is held, right? That's your ultimate goal. Get the dagger back to the hourglass. And you're just traversing this palace through the baths, through the zoo, through underground, like, I don't want to say catacombs, but underground ruins of another like potential palace that new one was built on top of.
Yeah.
All of these things, all these places with Farah to get to the top, to get back to the hourglass, to effectively, hopefully, reverse the effects.
That's right.
I mean, that's pretty much it. And then we'll talk about the ending here in a second. But the interactions, we touched on the interactions with the prince and Farah. As the game progresses, they get closer and closer. And there's one instance, and Farah kind of doubts the prince's ability doubts his ability to get the dagger back to the hourglass. So she kind of seduces the prince and then steals the dagger.
Ooh.
And it results in what I think is the most frustrating part of the game, and that culminates into the ending. So we'll talk about the combat and how our experiences in the combat, and we'll talk about your ending, and then because the combat's part of your most frustrating part of the game, and then I'll talk about my most frustrating part of the game, which will be the ending of the game.
Right on.
Because unless there's anything else you can specifically think story-wise, because the middle of the game is just you getting to the hourglass.
Yeah, I mean, it's really all just like, there's no...
Which is actually kind of nice.
Yeah, I was going to say, I love that about this game, is you're not overburdened with a big dynamic web story. You're really just... you're really in this palace with Farah, traveling with her, and your relationship's growing with her.
Oh, we should add this. Sorry, we should add that the game is presented as the prince telling a story.
That's true.
And it's so funny because it turns into like if you fall and you die or something, the prince is like, "That's not what happened. That didn't happen that way." And it's always really funny. It's always really cool. Just different. Yeah. Like, kind of like what you're saying. Farah didn't die there.
Yeah, Farah didn't die there. Let me retell that. Oh, shoot. What was I saying?
I have no idea. I accidentally sidetracked you.
Oh, it's okay. Oh, well, that's funny because I remember what I was saying. This game, you're not sidetracked by too many like intermingling webs of a story, or like it's not too dynamic, you know what I mean? It's really about you trying to undo your mistake, and in the meantime you had picked up a friend that is trying to help you do the same thing, and that relationship is dynamic because sometimes the relationship's trust is lost and trust is gained, and but you know, by the end of it, you can really see that there was like a meaningful relationship there. But again, like I said, you're not pulled into so many different directions. You're really just like trying to undo your mistake.
Yeah, and you have a goal, which is nice. It's a fun platformer. So again, climbing the walls, wall running, jumping, having the ability to undo your mistakes, like by rewinding time if you fall off a wall wrong or something.
Exactly,
it's really nice. That whole part of the game is fun. Like, it's just really good. It's super enjoyable.
Oh, it's so engaging. It's so satisfying to like get the hang of the controls, and there will be, I don't want to say that this game is easy, but it's not hard because, like I said, it's kind of handholdy a little bit in terms of for like the player. But it does feel really good when you get the hang of the controls and you're faced with a new puzzle or, maybe like a new obstacle course or objectives where it calls you need to like jump around, run walls and stuff. Mm-hmm. But you're so in the hang of the controls that you just nail it on the first try and it feels super good.
Yeah.
You're like, dang.
Except for those
that feels great.
Couple moments. There was something that I saw you doing. Like you showed, like, which is just shows just different playing, like where you would grab onto a pole, you know, and you'd just like swing around the pole. I don't know if you know this or not. If you just change your direction while you're swinging, the prince turns on the pole.
Oh yeah, I know that.
So you didn't have to stop every time.
It was. I think it's just like a habit.
No, I just saw that. It was one of those things. But and I say that only because it just goes into the fluid motion. It allows you to be able to continually move without the feeling you need to stop. And it makes you feel so good, except for those moments where you're like, cool, I know I need a wall run here. And so like you're running and you just don't hit the wall run button quick enough, so you just fall off the edge and just hang there.
Yeah.
And you're like, dang it. And so that kind of breaks that cycle, and it takes you out of it. But all the other moments are really good. It feels good.
Yeah, I think the game is very fluid. For anyone that has played the Assassin's Creed games and hasn't played Prince of Persia for some reason, I think you would find it to be pretty refreshing and interesting to go back to what might be the original Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, kind of. I would definitely say it was made by the same Ubisoft Montreal, which gave us some of the Assassin's Creeds.
Right.
It also gave us things like Splinter Cell and
right, which was also kind of like movement based in a lot of ways, and it was very intuitive. And like we said, two main things about this game: if you have the objectives that you're working towards, which are very simple, very linear. You have a little bit of story with the character, but the main meat and potatoes of the game, the puzzles and the movement, are just a lot of games have terrible movement and terrible puzzles, so you really need the story to be good. But this story is so simple that the puzzles are so good that it's just a good combination. It doesn't feel like we're looking any more of one or the other.
And we're looking at a game that's 20 years old at this point, right?
Right.
And I'm playing on original hardware on the PS2. It felt good. Like, it still feels good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then, so you have all these things that just feel great. Then they throw in something that is expected: combat.
Right.
And Prince of Persia is a puzzle game, and I stand by that. It is a puzzle game, which means the enemies are also mini puzzles onto themselves. So there's I think you can approach combat any way you want. The dagger gives you the ability to freeze enemies, then you can cut them in half and stuff. But to get the most benefit out of the dagger and abilities, you want to absorb the enemies. And I think you can do that pretty much any way you want. You can just attack the enemies head on, kind of, especially the early ones. But there's also like an optimal way to attack each of these enemies. And that's not as fluid and not as smooth as you really want it to be. I don't think it's horrible. It's not always bad, but it can get overwhelming and frustrating very easily.
Well, I think the tricky thing is, like, this game thrives in combat when you are, I would say, surrounded by, at maximum, 3 enemies. Because the way that the movement in combat works with this game is you're, it's, what is it, square to attack? It's square to attack, right?
Square to attack, and if you're doing it on PlayStation, yeah.
Right, and then X to roll and stuff.
Yep, X rolls, R1 blocks. X also vaults over.
Right, so it vaults too. So X is kind of your movement button, we'll call it.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got shielding, you've got...
apparently there's parrying.
Yeah, there is parrying, where if you shield and then you press the square button, you kind of do a parry.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
So... So the way the movement is, in particular in combat, is there's not a lock-on feature where you actually lock on, but the prince visually focuses his attention on an enemy so that when he's moving around, you can tell who he's focusing on.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, from there, once you can determine who he is focusing on at any given time, that X button, depending on how your directional input is on the left stick, determines what you'll do. So if you just, like, if you're facing the enemy and you want to go to the right, and you hold the right, or the left thumbstick right, and then press X, then you're going to roll around him to the right. And there's different things like that, right? That was just me trying to explain how the controls work exactly. But you can you can DI at him. Oh, ScrubHub dictionary glossary thing. DI is directional input.
But when you have DI in one direction, say towards it now, and then press X, you go to vault over the enemy. And then when you're vaulting over it, you can press square a couple times to attack it, which more often than not, with a lot of enemies, knocks it to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, I think this game thrives in combat when you're surrounded at maximum by 3 enemies, because it does feel very fluid.
I think I agree with that. 3 or 4, like,
yeah,
kind of puts you in this nice little thing, but you never just fight 4 enemies. There's like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 enemies.
Yeah, sometimes, and they can teleport.
And they teleport around you. So if you try to get away from them. The enemies progressively get... Okay, I don't want to say progressively get stronger the entire game. I don't think the enemies...
I wouldn't even say that they get smarter throughout the whole game. There was just, in my opinion...
The enemies...
to one spot, they picked up the ability to counterattack on your like vaulting over them a lot more often, which sometimes you accidentally vault over enemies because the DI input and the prince's focus is really hard to determine all at one time.
Yeah, especially if you get in like a crowded spot.
It's picking up like focus from potentially 9 enemies, and you may be putting DI input that you want, but it's not adding to the result you want because of the prince's focal attention is not
and sometimes
what you need.
Sometimes that focal point of the prince changes, so it doesn't just stay locked. I don't know if it's like the closest enemy is who he targets or something like that, but it definitely can change and it can cause issues. But so it's not that the enemies get smarter or that the enemies get stronger. It's that the enemies do change depending on certain situations to kind of, which is to the benefit of the game, like countering you. So you have to approach the new enemies at a different way. Or later in the game where they add even more enemies, like newer enemies, but they're really just different, and they start mixing these enemies in together. Right? Instead of just dealing with 2 types of enemies, you're now dealing with 3 types of enemies or 4 different types of enemies on top of their numbers.
Yeah.
So you have to systematically approach these enemies the right way in order to get rid of them the quickest to deal with the bigger threat enemies.
Right,
because those little dudes...
I would say that's the most appropriate way to say it.
Also, this is not an Elden Ring podcast episode, but... the most annoying enemy in Elden Ring are birds. The most annoying enemy in this game are freaking birds.
Oh yeah, the birds are terrible.
The sandbirds are god awful. The easiest way to dispatch, you hold the block button, the bird swings down, it hits your block, you swing back at it. Cool, easiest way.
I wish I knew that.
That's the easiest way to dispatch. The problem is multiple birds can come in and attack you at the same time, and sometimes they like swing down, one comes down and hits you, and then as you go to attack that bird, the other bird comes down and hits you and just knocks you on your butt. Like, it's super annoying.
That's the
worst enemy in the game.
That's a big thing in this game, I think, amongst all enemies, because I have clips that I showed you, and I know you've gone through this in the game.
Yep.
Where sometimes an enemy will smack down on you, and then as you're getting up, the next one's already queuing up an attack. So you get hit by that one, and then as you try to get up from that, a third enemy is queuing up an attack.
Dude,
and then a fourth one, and then the first one is now queuing up an attack.
So
they go in this cycle.
It's so funny.
It is funny.
Because, like, thematically, the game is like, you use time loops, basically. Like, rewinding time, re-forwarding to navigate these situations. And the enemies are like, oh, you like loops? We like loops, too. It just gets you in combat loops where they just beat the crap out of you, and you're like, man, and you just have to start over sometimes.
Dude, it's like literally. Have you seen the movie? It's Kung Pao Enter the Fist.
No, I think I have seen it, but it'd been a long time ago.
Dude, it's just like this scene where this like kung fu guy, he's like training himself, but he has these guys. He's like, okay, when I tell you I've had enough, you can stop. But they just start beating the shit out of him until he's unconscious, and then he can't speak up. And they're like, "Do we stop?" And he's like, "Oh, well, he didn't say stop," so they just keep beating the shit out of him.
That's so funny.
It's like the same thing, dude.
So we're talking about this one part of the game on this bridge, and in my opinion, I think we both agree, I think this is the hardest fight in the game because it's the first time that the enemies change up drastically. Like, you just got a brand new sword that's stronger, so you can effectively finish off the weak enemies you had been facing way faster. Like, a couple hits, they're dead. But the game says, well, screw that, we're just going to give you a bunch of tougher enemies that now start blocking your volts and start blocking your attacks and start looping these crazy combinations together.
Yeah, you're going to start chaining attacks and all stuff. But there's also a couple of weird things, too, like you have places to fall off. I think that's important to mention that you can get knocked off of the bridge, but
yeah, you can.
This is a PS2 game, so textures and hitboxes are weird and funky.
I'm gonna right here in the thing, I'm gonna show our two versions of our bridge fight. Right?
Okay,
do you want to do that?
Like while we're talking about it.
So we're talking about this bridge fight. We approached it in two different ways. I was aware of this issue that Pants had going in. And so I had this mindset. I'm going to tell on myself because it wasn't right of me to do this. I had this mindset of this game where I'm like, I remember this game from back in the day. And I remember playing it the very first time. I don't even remember. But I remember playing it again, and I remember just stomping this game. Like, stomping the crap out of it. I wish I had the memory card. I know I beat it really fast. Whatever. Pants has never played this game before. And it wasn't right of me to be like, oh, hey, it's not that long of a game, blah, 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 whatever. All the enemies are super easy. Because I remembered incorrectly. So
I dabbled in it, but admittedly, because I think I was even maybe the one that brought up wanting to play Prince of Persia.
Right, and that's fine. But
because I was like, it's super cool, and I even remember the enemies being pretty easy.
The first enemies are really easy. Like, the first enemies, you vault over, you attack them, and then you press the triangle button, and it kills them immediately. Like, it just does.
Oh yeah, they're just dead.
And so I was like, just vault over them and hit the triangle. Like, vault over, use your dagger. Vault over, use your dagger.
Just do it.
And Pants is like, that's not working. That's not working. And I'm like, I don't understand why. It should work. And then I saw his video. And I'm like, oh my God, dude, he's just getting beat down. And so then I got there. And I'm like, you know what? And these are the videos you're going to see. I got there. And I'm like, these guys should be just this easy. Dude, I wish I had the first take. I don't have the first take. Dude, they stomped me. I was like, okay, I'm going to vault over this guy. And he slammed me down in the ground. And all the guys just started beating the crap out of me. And I'm like, what? And I tried to vault over another guy and it didn't work. And I tried to vault over another guy and it didn't work. And so I was like, okay, obviously I was wrong. I made a mistake. So I used that time before they killed me to actually learn how to get rid of them really quickly. And that'll be the video you'll see now. It's me just going in my second attempt. I messed up a couple times, but I obliterated the crap out of them. Which 99% of it is wall vaulting. You basically
that's just gotta be it.
You basically jump on the wall kind of, and you launch back into them, and it knocks them on the ground, and then you stab your dagger into them, and they're gone. And all the blue armored guys in the game, that's how you did it.
Which
all blue armored guys.
Just do that. Yeah.
Like what's stupid, not stupid, but what's like crazy is what I was remembering. Like now that I'm thinking about it, in order to vault over an enemy, so like original enemy, you press X to vault, square to attack, triangle to kill them with a dagger. That's basically your motion. With these blue guys on the bridge, it's the exact same thing. It's X button to start the wall jump, square to attack, and then triangle to stab them with the dagger when they're on the ground. And I think that's where like maybe I'm like, it was the exact same. It's the exact same button combinations, and I just didn't remember them freaking stomping you and slamming you to the ground. Yeah, but it's the exact same. It's the exact same controls. You're just doing a wall jump instead.
That's right. Okay.
And in some enemies you had to actually, you vaulted and then you attacked twice and then stabbed, like the girls with like the daggers and stuff.
Yeah.
You could vault them, but you had to attack twice and then dagger. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise, if you tried to dagger after the first attack, they would block it.
Right.
Which was just frustrating. But that was pretty much the process of those enemies.
I would say, for sure, you guys will find out very quickly that I did not, or very soon, that I was unable, rather, to finish this game. The game said no.
It's a ScrubHub first?
It is a ScrubHub first, but the game actually just told me no. But I didn't get to experience every fight in this game, but I am very confident in saying that unless you just knew, and well, I mean, I shouldn't even say that, because like, if you're being smart and you're really thinking about it, then you probably could have figured out to like position yourself better in that fight so that you're not immediately fighting on the bridge, because these guys have teleport and stuff, so you can just put your weapons away and run away, and then they'll catch up with you to where you have walls now and you can do the wall jumping.
Yeah, I ran straight to the wall on mine.
Yeah, so, I mean, pro tip, don't fight on the bridge, because the bridge, like I said, if you guys didn't see that video, I don't know if Doc's played it on, the video editing or whatever yet, but some of the, I don't know, like the hit boxes on the bridge are weird against the ledges, so there was times where I was like at full health, I was in the fight for maybe less than 6 seconds, but I got knocked to the ledge of the bridge, and as my character was trying to get up, Prince was trying to get up, there was something weird about the hitbox that it like shoves you off the bridge. It like picks your character model up and shoves you off the bridge.
Yeah, that's just crazy. I saw that.
It's a really weird glitch or something. But that was just one of those struggles I was having with, especially when you can play the game so quickly, you can progress through this game pretty fast, which is what happened when I got to that point. It was like, I was fighting those blue dudes, like not even like the fight before, and then we pick up that sword. So now they're like, okay, we're gonna maybe give the enemies a little bit better AI or something, which is where their blocking and their counterattacking came from. To balance that, if you play through it super quick like that, and you're like, dude, what the hell's happening in this area? These guys out of nowhere are just crushing me, and I'm on this bridge now. Plus, there's like a ton of enemies on that bridge.
Yeah, there's a lot.
They throw so many enemies.
I think it's the hardest fight.
Barrett can shoot you. Barrett can shoot you.
Oh my god, I can't believe we didn't. And she's like, boom, and you're like, oh, and she's like, sorry. I'm like, no.
Yeah, sorry. And I'm like, I got shot. You just knocked me to the ledge.
I got shot 4 times during one fight. She just kept shooting.
That's insane.
And I was like, you need to stop. And like, she would shoot an enemy. And I promise you, dude, when I was like in a room and she's shooting the enemies that I'm fighting, trying to shoot the enemy that I'm fighting, which results in me getting hit. Dude, it was like boom, arrow, boom, arrow, boom, arrow. But God forbid, when she's there, when you're fighting the birds, she takes all freaking year to fire an arrow at a bird.
Oh yeah, she can't get her aim.
She just sits there and holds it and holds it and holds it.
Insane.
And then you swing on the bird and you kill the bird and then the arrow flies past it. I'm like,
right. God damn it.
So,
but yeah, I'd say that area's got to be like the toughest. We've talked about this a little bit.
I think it's the hardest fight in the game.
Yeah, sometimes difficulty isn't necessarily born of an enemy having high HP or the AI being really smart. Sometimes the difficulty lies in something that's exterior to what you're actually experiencing in the game.
It's like situational difficulty, environmental difficulty.
Yeah,
just something
like where the textures or the hitboxes are weird or bad, or
because if you watch my video, like it looks like I just took the enemies down with zero problem, but like it's just.
But and that's the funny thing is you can tell
ridiculous.
You can tell in my playthrough that I wasn't playing poorly.
Right? Yeah. No, you were doing what you knew to do. What the whole game, and that's the thing. What the game taught you to do up until this point.
Yeah, and
it's definitely a learning. It's a learning. I think that's a good way of putting it. It's probably the biggest learning curve in the game.
I think
for combat.
Looking back, it does tell you about the wall vault early on in the game against enemies that you don't need to use the wall vault on. So I think that's like once you learn that, you're like
cool. Oh, the wall vault's for these enemies.
Yeah, and then it kind of clicks if you remember that you can wall vault. If you don't remember, then you're kind of out of luck for a minute and you just fight them, brute force through them.
Right.
So that's the hardest part of the game for sure.
And speaking of out of luck, I think that is a good transition to the ending of my playthrough anyway, because it was actually very shortly after the bridge fight, unfortunately.
It's super unfortunate, dude.
I think I got to, I don't know. Did I tell you? Do you know if I gave you an exact percent?
You were at 6
71.
hours. You were at 6 hours exactly, and like 71%.
That's right.
Of the game.
Oh, well, the 6 hours was technically after me playing it for a while and then saving again. Because when I texted you, I was at 509.
Oh, so you tried it again for another hour. So you're still at 70-something% in 5 hours. Yeah.
So, to give you guys a little bit of just to explain the situation, there is one area of the game where you have to do a puzzle. And this puzzle includes jumping from bar to bar and then arriving at a platform, which you'll have to do this several times. You have to jump across these bars to get to a platform, and then you have to go back across the bars to get to a different platform. The platforms that you jump to they're pretty high jump from the bar, so you take a little bit of fall damage. But a precursor to this area, it's a pretty big boss, or not a boss fight, it's a big, like a gang fight.
It's a big fight with a bunch of enemies, yeah.
Yeah, and there's no opportunity to heal after that until I guess I should just say that. There's no opportunity to heal after that fight. You progress a little bit forward, and you go behind this door that shuts right behind you. It shuts right as soon as you go inside the door, go into the next area, and then you save like normal.
Because that's what you would normally do, yeah. I feel like
what you would normally do.
I don't want to fight all those guys again.
Right, exactly. So you're like, thank God, I'm going to save. Which leads you, after you save, you're like, cool, I'm going to go do this puzzle, which is the bar puzzle thing, which I got to. Now, I showed Doc, I let him watch or whatever. I even showed him gameplay. I streamed it to him. I had maybe literally one HP left after that fight. I got really lucky with that fight. I made it out with barely anything. But I went into that room, the door shut behind me, and I saved. So I can't complete the puzzle because in order to complete the puzzle, you have to take fall damage several times, and there's no means in that room for me to heal. So I just can't progress my game.
And that's super dirty. You want to know what's worse? As soon as you complete that puzzle, you have access to a fountain.
Which is crazy.
As soon as it's done, boom, there's a fountain right there.
And I think this brings up a pretty
Which makes sense
topic.
Because if you're taking forced fall damage, it makes sense they would give you a way to heal that.
Totally. Yeah, totally. And like I said, I think this brings up a pretty interesting topic or a thing of semantics, which I think maybe we could jump into an update sometime about. We haven't even, I think we've mentioned updates like 6 times and haven't actually released one yet.
They exist.
They do exist.
That's what the update should be. We should just updates about and release them about the games we've done.
Yeah, and just certain topics about it. But I think one topic that would be really interesting to talk about in an update is the idea of whether or not fall damage should be included in puzzles, or it should be necessary to complete puzzles based on themes. Because obviously, in this game in particular, we've already touched on that it's like a free running puzzle style adventure game where you're running along walls, you're jumping across ropes, swinging around bars and stuff, and it's quite an acrobatic game. And I don't know about you guys, you ever jump out of a swing? Doc, you ever do like a baby jump out of a swing? You don't even feel like you went that far, but you landed the wrong way and it sent a shock through your leg.
Oh yeah, just from landing the wrong way.
Just the wrong way. But this guy, he's fucking doing crazy shit, like making mad jumps and stuff. So I think it's, in my opinion, it's a little cute, right? It's a little cute to kind of force you to have to take fall damage and stuff. But you gotta be careful, guys. You gotta be really careful because, I could have hit this point in the game and really just walked away from it completely and never touched another Prince of Persia game.
Yeah.
Because I was like, bro, like I'm not gonna play the game if I like, and that is admittedly an ignorant viewpoint of certain things, is to set it down and never come back to it.
But true, at that point, that's 5-6 hours of your time that you put into it that you would have had to start over.
Yeah, I would have had to start over simply because the product in some scenarios had flaws in it, which none of us are perfect. And we've already said this. I'm going to speak for myself in this. I don't know how many copies of Prince of Persia: Sands of Time sold, but I'm just like one of every one of those other thousands of people that bought it. I just so happen to put a mic in my hand and I want to talk about it. So, I don't think my experience is too much different from others, but admittedly, like you guys saw the clips earlier, that bridge fight was wildly different between Doc and I. So, people definitely have different experiences, but I'd like to think that some people share that same experience as me. And as game developers, we've got to play test those things, right? We gotta plan for every scenario. I say we, like I'm a game tester. But I think game testers should try to put themselves in as many situations as possible and really think about those things.
Yeah.
And hindsight's 20/20, you know what I mean? But I do think that now that it is a 20-year-old finished product, it does take down the number a little bit for me in my head.
So
that I got soft locked.
Yeah. So Prince of Persia came out November 2003, right?
Mm-hmm.
By the end of 2003, Prince of Persia: Sands of Time had 2 million copies.
Jeez, that's pretty good.
In Europe, and most of it's in Europe.
I believe that.
It seems in North America, it looks like 2, 3, 4, 500,000 of that is North America, but that's in a month. You know,
damn.
Like that's still a pretty good number. It did pretty well. It just didn't do good over here, but it did phenomenal over in Europe.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But yeah, so that since you brought that up, so those were your frustrating moments. That was unfortunately your end game. You got stuck into something that you just
I got stuck in the tower. Prince and Pharaoh got stuck in the tower for eternity, never to return the dagger to the Afterglow.
I think the bridge was the most difficult fight, but it was not the most frustrating. The most frustrating, as you progress, you get past all these things, you get towards the top. I said earlier, Farah seduces you. steals your dagger away from you. But she leaves her medallion behind, which is nice. So you're still protected from the sands, right? So you're not going to get turned into the sands. So because her whole thing is she kind of distrusted you and didn't think that you could finish the objective, so she decided to do it herself. The entire game, you've been using this dagger. So if you miss a jump, you can rewind time. If you get stuck fighting enemies, you can freeze them. The entire game, you've been using this dagger constantly. Gone. You have no dagger. You have no dagger. Oh, and guess what? There's still puzzles for you to do. There's still wall running.
You know what?
There's still jumping. Oh, did I also mention that she stole your sword also?
Dude.
So now you have no weapons. And
I didn't do anything.
The first thing you do is you run past a whole bunch of enemies. That's the very first thing you do. And then you go into a room. But so I praise this game in what they did here. You go into and it's like, boom, cool. Now you're in a room that's a puzzle. The enemies aren't bothering you, so it's no big deal. You do this puzzle. It unlocks another sword upgrade. Like another sword. So
I love that.
Third sword, I think, you get in the game. This sword one-hits enemies.
Oh my god.
It's just a boom, they're gone. They're dusted. So
That's crazy.
So you have no dagger to absorb, but you're just one-shotting enemies. Except the big brutes, like if they block, they still block.
Yeah.
But then you just swing again and it kills them, basically. And so you have to continue climbing back up because you like fell from where you were. You were close to the top of the tower and you fell. And so you continue climbing back up and you have to do these puzzles. Dude, I was stuck in this one spot for 30 minutes because I can't rewind time. So if you miss the jump or you fall off or something like that, you just reload.
Yeah, you're just done.
There are some hard checkpoints though, like once you got to it. So if you died, you wouldn't have to go all the way back to your last save point, which was nice.
That's forgiving.
But it was still super frustrating, and I was stuck because I actually, where I had to jump, it was onto like this beam, and I couldn't see it. It like blended in with the wall like perfectly, and I just couldn't see it, so I had no idea what to do. So I just kept dying over and over and over again.
That was another thing about this game. This is minor, but I would say the environment sometimes the environment blends into itself.
Yeah, and that's I think technologically an issue more so than anything.
Yeah, I think.
And that's kind of how, like, hey, it's a puzzle, right? It's forcing you to look at stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's tricky to say that they didn't mean to do that.
I mean, I'm sure
because the ambience in this game is pretty cool. I like the way that it feels. It feels great, and like there was even some moments where you find yourself exploring, like walking on the outside skirts of the palace or whatever, where you're on like balconies or whatever, and you can see it's nighttime and you can see the moon, and there's moonlight glistening off the water, and this like I don't know, it's just super atmospheric and beautiful, and even like kind of like the fountains where you increase your health or whatever. So the shaders is kind of where my mind is. It's like the shaders are really good, but still sometimes the environment's really hard to see like puzzles and shit. Or there's a lot of line work in the architecture, which also sometimes looks like ladders, like in the library. There's a lot of things to look at when you're like trying to figure out these puzzles. So it's hard to figure out and map out how you're going to do things sometimes, especially when sometimes you have to like wall run and then like jump, like wall jump 3 different times.
Yeah.
So you have to like map out what you're doing, but then there will be like saw blades going up and down the walls. So you have to time it and map out what you're going to do for like the next 7 seconds. So
It's wild, but
it's so much fun.
It's good. Like all that stuff's engaging. Good. So I'm gonna wrap up the story. So I got through that fine, cool. I lost a bunch of time just because I was being silly and I just couldn't figure it out. I figured it out. You finally catch back up to Farah. The prince is like, Farah, don't use all the sands, because she's like getting past all these enemies, and he's like, she's got to be using the sands. It's the only way that she's getting past these enemies. So finally you catch up to her, and a whole bunch of stuff happens, and the place is like crumbling apart, and Farah falls. You grab on, and you're like, she's holding onto the dagger. The vizier basically comes in trying to steal the dagger from you, and this all culminates in this situation where Farah's hanging, holding onto the dagger, and the prince grabs the dagger by the blade, right? And he's holding her by the blade of the dagger, and it's just slicing into his hand. It's really crazy. And ultimately she lets go and she falls. She's gone. But now you have your dagger back, and you're about to be attacked by all of these soldiers again. And wouldn't you know it, she used all the sand in the dagger. So you can't even freeze time. You got your dagger back, cool, and you're being attacked by these guys who can block your sword. The big sword that one-shots everything, they can block it. And they just freaking come at you endlessly. And it's super frustrating. When their guard is down, you still one-shot them, and they're gone. But it's still frustrating, and I died there. It happens. But then also,
it does happen.
It does happen. It just does. I mean, it's not a perfect game. Ultimately, you beat the enemies. The prince gets to the hourglass, sticks the dagger back into the hourglass, and it rewinds time all the way back to the beginning of the game. Before he had even released the sands. Actually, well before he had released the sands.
Well before, because doesn't it depict him actually going and finding the dagger?
He's in... he still has the dagger.
Or does he still have it when he returns?
He still has the dagger when he returns, and so he immediately runs to Farah to tell Farah the story, because of the vizier basically tricked them into going and sieging this palace for the treasure. And so he tells Farah this whole story, and that's what you lived out, was the prince telling Farah the story. And then the vizier basically finds you, and that's kind of your final boss fight right there. And the prince gives the dagger back to Farah at the end, and the prince leaves. That's pretty much it.
Basically it.
The one thing I can't figure out, like, obviously the prince still has his memories. I'm convinced that Farah does not have her memories, because she doesn't have the necklace to protect her from the sand's effects anymore. But I don't know if the vizier still had memories. I don't think he did. His magic stick protected him from transforming, but I don't know if it retained his memories of the events that happened.
That's interesting.
I like to think that they just didn't. But it makes sense. My point was the prince has the dagger and the medallion by this point, which is why Farah would not remember anything. But it's possible the vizier still did. That's a game. I'm just kidding.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Get Matt.
There's no copyright infringement here.
I didn't say it.
Well, I think this game...
Get Matt Pat on this episode. Let's talk about it.
I think that would be really cool.
It would be cool.
I think, all in all, I really enjoy when a game sometimes has some sort of open-endedness to it. I mean, I said this to you before we got on the podcast. I'm a big Zelda fan. You know this.
Yeah.
And I think one of the best things, it's the best and worst things about being a Zelda fan is the lack of confirmation in the community from Zelda about certain things, or from Nintendo about certain things. So it kind of allows fans to generate speculation about their favorite games, and that's fun, right? Like, everyone likes to have feel like they have some insider knowledge if they wish to take their favorite games that far, as long as the people making the games aren't confirming anything or denying anything. I'm curious to see. I mean, I'm excited to play the other games because you told me the story actually carries over.
Dude, the story's really good. Like, the overall story, like, we kind of were talking about branching timelines. I know we didn't say that here. But the other games kind of go into that realm of thought and address stories and potential outcomes in a really cool,
that'd be really cool.
A really cool way.
Yeah, that sounds super, super dope. And I mean, like, thematically, I like the granted, I've only played a little bit of each of them, I think. I think I've only played a little bit of well, obviously I played Sands of Time. At least for 71% of it anyway. I've played a little bit of, I think, the second one that came out. The one that's got all the red and stuff.
Warrior Within?
On the title. Warrior Within.
Yeah, it's a dark, aggressive game, because not only do you it still has the same abilities. I don't remember how you actually use the sands though, because you don't have the dagger anymore.
That's interesting. I mean, I don't want to say we are definitely going to play it, but
I think we need to. I think we need to.
I
was going to say, like, you're able to, like, pick up all kinds of different weapons and stuff. Dual wielding swords. That's right, and all kinds of really cool stuff, and they really upped the parkour in a really nice way. Like, running along the wall, stabbing your knife into one of those flags and just, like, sliding down the flag and stuff.
That's super sick.
It's really neat.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I really like seeing the visual progression from each of these games. Kind of how like the prince looks. I don't know. He looks young and maybe a little naive in this one, and he is young and naive in this. And it seems like in the other games, on the at least the titles, he's much more mature. Like he's darker, obviously, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
There's some kind of darker presence to him, something evil maybe. But I think that looks really cool, and all the thematics of this game, everything. So all in all, was pretty cool. It was totally up my alley, but that bridge, bro, and getting locked out of the game,
dude. Yeah, that's such a bummer. I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know it was even possible.
And I think it's so situational, but I think it's really funny that for the one playthrough that I was attempting to, like, my first one, that I was like, okay,
we're actually for sure gonna just beat this game, and that's what I got.
That I know, every time you run into something. But
yeah, I feel like me and Doc kind of mentioned that a little bit just before we end the podcast, like how I tend to jump into these games and we're like, all right, let's have a great time, and then I find the thing. I tend to find the thing about these games, which I think is pretty funny. Honestly, I don't mean to. It's not like I'm looking for them; they find me. It's not an Elden Ring podcast, but Elden Ring is perfect.
Man,
that's all I'm gonna say.
There are 58 secondary weapons in Prince of Persia: Warrior Within.
Jeez.
58 weapons.
You can throw them too, right?
Yeah, I believe you can.
Yeah, you can like fucking toss them at people.
Dude. Anyway, before we start confirming another Prince of Persia game.
Yeah.
We're gonna wrap this one up. And Pants, do you want to tell them the advice we give to people who are unable to complete video games?
Why do I have to do it? Why?
Okay.
It's not a matter of me getting good, but I will say, if you're not good,
get good.
You gotta get good. That's right. You just gotta get good. God damn it.